Okay, I'm not exactly sure what happened there. I was having technical difficulties getting online. My apologies. So, okay, well, welcome to, May 30th. My name is Geoff Ginter. This is Real Progressives. I'm really sorry it took some time for this to get off the ground, but hopefully technical difficulties are behind me. That would be nice. With that in mind, I also want to point out I am trying to get guests on. I have had technical difficulties doing that. I'm not exactly sure what the problems are. It seems to either work or it doesn't, but until I can get it to be bulletproof, I'm not inviting anyone on. It's embarrassing, to be honest, and I want to make sure that it works. If I publish that something is going to happen, I want to make sure it happens. So the only thing I know for sure is that I can get on, except I kind of made a mockery of that today as well for the first 4 minutes. So, but I am here. This is Geoff Ginter, live with Real Progressives. Thank you for joining me. Once again, I get bombarded with questions. And again, if anyone has questions for me, if anyone has comments for me, please let me know. You can always private message me if you want. Put them in the comments for this video. Reach out to me in any way you would like. Anything that you want to either speak with me about, or hopefully that I'll address at a later on a later show. But this has been coming up a lot. This is not necessarily single payer related. I'm going to be getting to that in a moment. But the issue of what do we do? I get this all the time. What do we do? Trump is in the White House. What do we do? The Republicans are taking everything they possibly can. What do we do? And every time I engage in this particular line of questioning, every time I engage in this ideology, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? I run into this idea that people are looking for some kind of magical response. That someone somewhere is going to have that magical, this is what it is. Like a treasure map. If you follow the map, if you go down to Route 70 and you will find there a diner, and behind the counter there will be a special gem, and with this gem you will go to the 3 corners of the universe and you will place the gem there, and suddenly the answers will come to thee. It ain't like that at all. It's really not that complicated. The answer is simple. The implementation of it is hard. And that's where I feel people are falling short. They want something easy, they want something fast, or at the very least, they want something, they can't believe that the solution is actually as simple as it is. You have to get involved in any way you possibly can. And it doesn't matter if it's something you want to do. There is no one on God's green earth that will save you unless we collectively do it ourselves. You can say you're saving yourself, but in the act of doing that, you will have saved everyone. Because that is the essence of what we're talking about here. I talk about love a lot. Why? It's not because I'm hippy-dippy, lovey-dovey bullshit. It's because it's the only reason to get out of bed. It's the only reason to go to work. It is the only reason to hold someone tight. It is the only reason to do anything. Love is the answer. The application of love is the answer. I've said this before to people who say, well, love is not going to get a single payer. Of course it is. Not love alone. Love is the springboard. Love is the starting point. I've said this before. MMT, modern monetary truth, without love gets you the military-industrial complex, gets you Wall Street, but MMT with love will get you single-payer healthcare, 100% green energy right now. It will get you free college tuition. It will get you the federal jobs guarantee. It will end gun violence. It will absolutely end the opioid epidemic. You must come at these things with love. And once you have that in your heart, which of course you do, then you must act. And that is the stumbling block, the act. We are surrounded on all sides. Can I say that? Surrounded on all sides? Well, I just did. We are surrounded with all manner of shit. Shit that we allowed to happen. So I certainly understand where people get paralyzed. I've got so much to do. We have to fix this. We got to fix this. We got to fix this. Relax. Calm down. Take a deep breath. Center yourself. Remember why you're angry. Remember that there's nothing wrong with anger, but remember with a calm mind, remember love. Remember why you were angry in the first place. You were angry because your communities are in disrepair. Your schools are for shit. Your children are in danger. You have dangerously high levels of toxins in the environment. You have immeasurable insecurity, economically speaking. And that translates to, how will I ever be able to retire? I'm going to be washing the toilets at Walmart and have a heart attack and fall into the toilet. That will be my retirement party. Face down in a toilet at Walmart. We have reasons to be afraid. We have reasons to be upset. We have reasons to be angry. But these reasons are rooted in love. Love of self, love of community, love of children. If we don't lose sight of the love, we will be able to act with righteousness. We will be able to act with authority, with determination, but not with selfishness. So with that in mind, armed with that, the next question becomes, what do we do with all this determination? And to that I say, everything. And I know that sounds simplistic, but the problem is that we do have a population that is not used to doing anything. So first and foremost, write. Write your congressman, write your local paper, write your international papers, write. Tell people how you feel. You have no idea if what you say, even if it doesn't actually lead to anything, you have no idea if you, in the act of you saying it, publishing it, putting it out somewhere, that you are not inspiring someone. I went to a town hall. All I did was stand up and speak my truth. I did it very loudly, but I had reason to be angry. I'm not ashamed of it. And that had effects. Some people hated me for it. Some people loved me for it. It has effects. Everything that you do has effects. So do something. Start with talking. Start with writing. Start with putting down on paper how you feel. In the act of writing, let those juices move you. Then go out and find like-minded individuals. Join groups. Join groups that want to do something. Avoid the groups that just want to wank. There's a lot of them out there. Join them and push them to do something. Or find the groups that are looking to actually do something. Join real progressives. It's filled with activists, teachers, mentors, people that actually know how to achieve what we need to achieve. And the next thing is educate yourself. Educate yourself on as many topics as possible, but mostly educate yourself on the economics. I cannot begin to tell you, as angry as I was at the town hall, I am fucking livid. Once I realized the economics, once I realized how we have been lied to every time a politician tells us we can't do X, Y, and Z, every time I hear someone on CNN or MSNBC or, God help me, Fox News when I check in on them, every time They tell us that we can't afford it, that the debt and the deficit are coming to eat our children. I lose my fucking mind because it's a lie. It is a lie. There are two choices under those circumstances. You either have people who are incompetent and don't know the truth, but are in positions of power or in positions of influence to put these shit shows down our throat. Or they're lying. It really comes down to those two things. They either don't know or they do. And they're lying. So the question is why? So this is going to get into the meat of what I wanted to talk about today. I think it's about 15 years ago. I have to look it up again. There was an episode of The West Wing that dealt with this, and this is why I actually looked up. There actually was a poll, several polls, and if you've been paying attention at all, it does actually come up in actual political discourse every couple of years in some fashion. But there was an idea, a poll put forth, where should the United States flag have protections? Should there be a constitutional amendment to protect the flag against burning? Now, me personally, I don't think there should be. I think it's freedom of speech. I think it's a relatively benign form of protest. There are those that feel differently. Power to you. You know, it can be a very disturbing image, depending upon what your relationship with the flag is and what you think the flag represents. Having said that, there was a poll put out several years ago that polled how you feel about it. Basically, yes or no. Do you support an amendment to protect the flag, or do you not? And as it turns out, about 60% of the population actually were in support of a constitutional amendment to protect the flag. And that particular poll went that far and no farther, as many polls do. I cannot overemphasize, do not simply blindly trust polls. Until you've actually seen the polling questions and find out what they were asked and what their possible responses were, be careful of polls. Yeah, seriously, 60% were in favor. Again, I think this is about 15 years or so ago, thereabouts. But that was just the one poll, and it didn't really dig very deep into the psyche of the American people. You had one question, you had one of two possible responses. Another poll, around about the same time, asked the same questions, but dug a little bit deeper. Essentially, do you support a constitutional amendment to protect the flag? Do you not? Those that do, how important is this issue to you? Those that don't, how important is this issue to you? As it turns out, there is a portion of the population that supports a constitutional amendment to protect the flag no matter what. It is a really, really small percentage. Most of the people that were answering yes ranked the importance somewhere along the lines of, what the fuck are you asking me this question for? Do we have single-payer health care? Do we have endless wars? Do we have, environmental disasters going all over the place? What are you doing spending your time with this insane question? So as it turns out, most people, if everything else is taken care of, if we honestly have nothing else to do, would support a constitutional amendment to protect the flag. But as long as we have something more important like litter, then they would probably really vote against you if you made that the central aspect of your running for office. So this is why polls are important. But this has led me to think something very critical about modern monetary theory, the opposition to all the things that we who teach MMT espouse MMT. Because to me, MMT is simply a description of currency. That's it. The farther away you get from the cold, hard facts of currency, you have left MMT. What you do with that information is critical. MMT simply describes currency. It just tells you where it is born, it tells you how it circulates, tells you where it goes to die. That's it. It doesn't matter what economic system you're talking about, it's the same thing. That's MMT. It is apolitical, it is absolutely nonpartisan. And that's why we say we don't use MMT, or at least we don't need to use it. It is already being used. It's like if we could actually use mathematics or arithmetic every time I go to the store and give them 20 and they give me change. We could just use arithmetic. We do use arithmetic. That's how we do it. This is how the federal government spends money. We call it MMT. Call it anything you want. Call it Betty. It's still the same thing. And right now, the federal government uses MMT to enrich the oligarchs, to enrich Wall Street, to enrich the military-industrial complex, to enrich insurance companies. It is being used right now. We're just not the beneficiaries of it. So we who teach MMT do have a progressive agenda in mind. At least I can't think of a single person, economist, activist, ordinary person just like me. Just keep spending on all the wrong things. Thank you, Johnny. I can't think of a single person that talks about MMT that wants to use it for conservative values. I can't think of anyone. This is not to say that conservatives don't understand MMT. I think a lot of conservatives in government right now do understand it very well. They just don't want you to understand it. They want you to think that the government is broke. They want you to think that there's just no money. We spend on war because we have to. We have to. Come on, we're the U.S. government. It's what we do. But it's a lie. It's a lie. So here's the thing. The reason I brought up the flag and polls and opposition. You say that you are opposed to something. Say you're opposed to single-payer health care. There's a lot of people that are. Most people in this country want single-payer. That is proven. There are numerous polls. I know I'm saying being very distrustful of polls, but when you got so many, just look it up. You will have no end of polls to read that say that the American people, anywhere from 50 to 75%, depending on which poll you look at, they want single-payer health care. But a lot of people are opposed. And a lot of people that want it are not really fighting that hard for it. Why? Because most of them think that the federal government needs your tax dollars to be able to pay for things. They hear how expensive it's going to be. Even if they actually hear someone say it would be less expensive than what we do now, which it would be, all they hear are the numbers. Billions of dollars, billions of dollars. I've heard some people say trillions of dollars. All they hear is a huge number, and they believe that it must come from taxpayers. So if you're against it, I've heard people say against it because it's too expensive. We can't do it. It's too expensive. Fair enough. But how many people have, say, for example, gone to an expensive restaurant because their boss took them there? They themselves would never go, not because they don't want to eat there, but because it's just too expensive. I can't afford it. Oh, it's on you? Okay, not a problem. It's kind of like that. You don't want single-payer health care because you think it's going to be too expensive, and you're afraid that somewhere down the line that's going to come out of your paycheck, that your taxes are going to have to go up to be able to pay for it. I teach MMT, and I talk to everyone I possibly can get my hands on because I want them to understand that we can have single-payer health care and your taxes don't have to go up 1 cent. In fact, they can come down. We can have free college education and it's not going to cost you a red cent. In fact, your taxes might come down. Taxes are necessary. Taxes are needed, but they are not needed to pay for federal funding. And all you have to do is look to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution and realize that that's true. Now, I know that Article 1, Section 8 also talks about borrowing on the credit of the United States of America. And that is because at the time of the founding, we went on a gold standard. The federal government creates all this money because they gave themselves the power to do so. Article 1, Section 8, look it up. It says a lot of things. But amongst those things it says, 1, Congress and only Congress shall create the currency. 2, Congress shall set the value of the currency. 3, Congress shall levy taxes. Now, in a brief explanation of these things, what does this mean from a practical application? If they create the currency and no one else can, you can't, I can't, corporations don't. As Stephanie Kelton, PhD, who was the chief economic advisor to Bernie Sanders, money doesn't grow on rich people. Where did they get their money in the first place? They've got a lot of it, and it is tempting to think that rich people must be the start of the dollar. It's not. They are not. They can't make money like the federal government does. Federal government makes money. That is the actual creation of money. Rich people make money usually by stealing it from everyone else. And yes, I know I'm being hyperbolic when I say steal. But here's the thing. If the federal government can make it and no one else can, when they impose a tax, how the hell are you going to pay it? Because they only accept payment in US dollars, their currency. They're not accepting it in any other denomination other than US dollars. So if you owe taxes, how are you going to get US dollars? You don't make it, your boss doesn't make it, everyone's got to earn it somehow. So it makes sense that the federal government who creates it must spend it into existence first. They must hire you. They must put you to work. I need roads, I need schools, I need bridges, I need infrastructure, I need teachers, I need all manner of things. I am government. I need a shitload of things to be able to function as government. I've got a few choices. I can either press you all into service, and you'll find numerous examples throughout history where governments have chosen to do that. Doesn't work out very well. Or I can put you to work. I create as much money as I need to. Money is no object. I'm the federal government. I wrote into existence a law that says I create the currency. So however much it takes to be able to get you to do X, Y, and Z, that's how much I'll pay. Or, as long as I am imposing the tax and you're going to be punished if you don't pay it, I'll tell you how much I'm going to pay. And you will. Because you need the money or you're going to go to jail. So this is how this works. Federal government spends first, taxes second. Your tax dollars are not needed. So even though Article 1, Section 8 does talk about borrowing on the credit of the United States, that's a gold standard thinking. The federal government wanted to be able to add stability to the value of currency, and gold was very popular. There was a lot of it. So they pegged their currency to gold. For every dollar that you bring back to us, we will exchange a certain amount of gold. And if you do that, you can only create as much money, even though you can create as much money as you want, you can only create and spend as much money as you have gold reserves to defend. So if you have $100 billion worth of gold, you can only have $100 billion in the economy. Simple. And if you want to spend more than that, then you might want to take some of those tax dollars, which do come second. I spend first, then I tax. And if I need to keep a consistent money supply, and I want to spend more than $100 billion, and I've only got $100 billion in gold, I might take some of that tax money and put it back into the economy for spending. I have technically spent more, but it's the same money. It just keeps coming around. So the money supply is constant. Or I might borrow. You have already earned US dollars, Mr. Corporation, Mr. Private Citizen, Mr. Whoever. And I will say, there, let me sell you a bond. It's a savings account. I'll pay you interest. Boom, now I've got this extra money and I can spend it, invest it in the hopes that I will get a greater tax base. So I'll be able to pay that off. And why do I do that? Why do I pay it off? Because I have to defend my gold supply. I can only have a consistent amount of money in circulation. So if I use your tax revenue to spend, if I float a bond to be able to spend, it's still the same money that was in existence. I have the gold reserves to defend all that. I'm just recycling some of it. That's all that is. But since Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard once and for all, ended the Bretton Woods, I'll explain this very briefly. In the Great Depression, FDR took us off the gold standard. Why? Because we needed to be able to spend. We had unemployment of up to 20%. We had huge productive capacities. But the private sector was not filling in the gaps. If they couldn't make profit off of it, they weren't hiring workers. So the federal government had to step in. But again, if it has only so much gold in supply, it can only spend so much money. And if I have to take revenue from your taxes to be able to supplement what I want to spend, and we got 20% unemployment, I don't have that much revenue. So they took us off the gold standard. Now, suddenly, I'm untethered. I don't have to have only $100 billion of cash in circulation. I could have $200 billion if that's what it takes to be able to get the economy moving. That's the job of government. At least one of them anyway. So FDR took us off the gold standard. And what did we do? We got out of the Great Depression. And then we went into World War II. We were able to spend really big and be able to mass an armada that was able to help us win World War II. And what did we have at that point? We had full employment. Everyone was working. Women were working. Men were working. Children to some degrees. But everyone had a job. So we actually had a problem in the early 1940s where we might have had an inflationary problem, where we would have spent more money into circulation than the country could have produced goods and services to purchase. If everyone's got money and you can only produce so much bread, and everyone wants that bread, then the cost of that bread's going to go up. So you've got a couple of choices. You either got to find a way to produce more bread, got to import more bread, or you got to be able to reduce people's spending habits. You can do that through taxes. In World War II, we actually did that through war bonds. Be patriotic, buy a war bond. It wasn't funding the war. What it was doing was helping to relax the economy. Because if everyone's got money and everyone is spending, then we have an inflation problem, potentially. So we floated bonds so that they could take your discretionary money, put it into a savings account, don't spend it now, spend it later, hopefully when we have greater productive capacities, and we did. After World War II, 23 countries got together to decide how we're going to do economically for the rest of for the foreseeable future. We just had one of the worst wars in human history. We need to be able to rebuild. We would like to have some stability. So just like we had gold standard before in the hopes of stability, which incidentally we did not have, it did not work as stability. You can look that up. Bretton Woods was decided to be able to bring a certain amount of predictability so that countries that needed to be able to rebuild would be able to rebuild with a certain amount of predictability. So what they did, these 23 countries got together, 22 of them decided to peg their currencies to the US dollar, and the US dollar pegged its currency back to gold. And for a while, things went well. GDP rose in the United States, wages rose with it, but internationally, we were having some problems. If you were a poorer country, if you could not have sufficient exports, you were having trouble, always falling back into recession, always falling back into recession. You are able to print as much money as you need, but you can't because you have to defend your US dollar reserves. It gets to be a bit of a problem. You dig yourself out of a hole, you wind up right back in one. You print more money to be able to get back to full employment and to be able to engage the population, to be able to increase GDP, but now you've overspent and you've got to defend your US dollar reserves, so you've got to fall back into a recession. Poorer countries were having a hard time with this. And as it turns out, towards the end of the 1960s, the U.S. was having a problem because the U.S. was in Vietnam and it takes money. And we were having a hard time being able to kill a lot of people. So what happened is Richard Nixon finally ended Bretton Woods once and for all. No more gold standard. We can now spend as much as we need to do the things that we need. And the only thing we have to do is look at the horizon. Do we have full employment? Does everyone have jobs? Are they good paying jobs? Are we making investments in our future, in education, in healthcare, in infrastructure, in green energy? Are we making these investments so that we will have a productive enough society so that all these dollars that we are spending into existence will find its way into the pockets of those that will be able to have goods and services to purchase? Except we didn't do that. We took us off the gold standard and we kept on a gold standard way of thinking about the economy. Everything costs money and we don't have enough money and we need your tax revenue for this. And people are still, to this day, 46 years after the Bretton Woods was finally abolished in 73. He did it in 71 and took 2 years to finally come down. And people are still saying, I don't want my tax dollars going towards X, Y, and Z. I myself, just not that long ago, was saying, look, taxes are the price we pay to get the things that we want. And sometimes you have to pay for things you don't like. I don't like bombs. I don't like tanks. I don't want my tax dollars going towards that, but I will pay more to be able to get single payer. I was saying these things. And then I found out that's not the way it works. And why did I think that was the way it works? Because presidents were telling me that's the way it works. And politicians of all stripes on both sides of the aisle were telling me that's the way it works. And everyone on the news was saying that's the way it works. And why? Who pays their paychecks? I'm not talking about their salaries. Who pays for them to be able to get into office? Who owns all those media companies, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News? Who owns it? It ain't you, and it ain't me. The people they purchased are all walking the halls of Congress and the White House right now. And they are on your TV screens. And here's the thing. When you realize that GDP rose and wages rose at the same time from 1945 all the way into the early 1970s. Yes, we were on a gold standard, but it was becoming a problem. But at the very least, the work that you were putting in, you were able to share in the wealth, assuming you were a white male. Little caveat there. We'll get to that. But after that, call it what you will. Call it what you will in terms of why this happened. I have my little pet theories, but the practical application is that after the Bretton Woods was finally demolished, GDP continued to rise and our wages stagnated. They went after unions. They went after overtime pay. They went after everything, every pillar of the New Deal. They took away the fairness doctrine. They allowed more and more corporations to own all the media. Independent media went away. So you got fewer and fewer viewpoints. You got less and less information, even though there were still dozens and dozens and dozens of stations, news stations and radio stations and TV stations. They're all owned by the same corporations and fewer of those corporations. You get the same regurgitated information all the time. Everyone now thinks that tax dollars pay for things. We've had 40 years of opportunity for us to be able to be told by people who should have known, in my opinion, by people that did know, that the Bretton Woods deal was done, the gold standard is done. There is a whole new world out there. We can absolutely, positively afford it because cost is immaterial to an organization like the federal government that creates its own currency. It cannot go broke. It cannot become insolvent. How could it? From a pure application, from a pure economic, macroeconomic reality, operational reality, if it needs more money, it creates more money. People say that the debt is a problem. The interest on the debt, oh my God. Well, if your tax dollars are going to paying towards that debt, then yeah, that would be a problem. And that's why debt is a problem to a private household, to a state, to a corporation, to a municipality. These people go into debt. They don't issue the currency. They are users of the currency. They have to be careful. They have to earn as much as they can and be careful how they spend it. Be careful when they borrow. But the federal government is not like that at all. The federal government does something fundamental that you and I and corporations and states can never do. They create a currency and enforce the demand for that currency. If I was able to go into my basement and churn out Geoff bucks and force the entire nation to be able to accept it, then I would be completely untethered. Economically, as it turns out, I'm simply untethered to reality because that's never going to happen. But the federal government that creates its own currency can never become insolvent. So why do I teach MMT? Why do I get people to understand MMT as hard as I can? Because I want to be able to reach those people that oppose single-payer health care and say, I know you don't want it. I know you think it's expensive. I know that you're afraid that your taxes will go up. Let me teach you something. Let me show you something. Let me show you the Constitution of the United States of America. Let me show you Article 1, Section 8. Let me show you where Richard Nixon ended the gold standard. Let me open your eyes to what that actually means. You'll say, well, why didn't anyone tell me this before? Because they didn't want to. Because as wages stagnated, as GDP continued to go up, as more and more wealth was created and diverted to the 1%, to the oligarchs, to the corporations, and away from everyone else, what did we start to do? We started to mortgage our houses. I remember the commercials from the 1980s. Did you know that you're sitting on a bank right now watching this commercial? Just refinance the mortgage on your house. They went for the elderly who already finished paying off their house and cut them to remortgage it, take out a loan and use their home as collateral. We subsist and we prop up this economy on the backs of our debt. And we have to come to a fundamental understanding. If the federal government is in debt, debt to the federal government is simply the entirety of the money supply currently swirling around everywhere in the world. All US dollars in your pocket, in your bank, everywhere. That is not taxed back yet. That's all the debt is. Every dollar is technically a liability of the federal government. And we can trace this back to the gold standard. They promised to exchange those dollars for gold. It was a liability. It was an IOU. It was an IOU for gold. Now it's simply an IOU for tax obligations. You get to extinguish your tax obligation with the one thing and only thing that the federal government will accept, their own currency. It is a liability of the federal government. Ergo, it's technically a debt. But it is not a debt that need ever be repaid. So that is what a debt is to the federal government. What is a debt to you? A debt to you means I need to borrow this money. I need to go to a bank who is going to create money, but not like the federal government does. The federal government creates high-powered money. When they spend, they don't ever need that money back until they tax it. But when you go to a bank, they use keystrokes just like the federal government. They will create currency just like the government, but it's debt. It is debt because that money has to be repaid. Federal government spends and new net financial assets are created. Their spending is your income. When the bank credits your account with the loan, they expect every penny back. It is not a net financial asset. It is sum zero. And on top of that, they are going to be expecting interest. You all know how this works. You go to a bank, you get a credit card, you go to a predatory lender like a payday lender, they'll get you the cash. But they want it back with interest. So you have to be able to cut corners, save. Hopefully you're going to make an investment in your future that will translate into higher wages, so you'll be able to pay that money back. How often does that pay out? Our wages have been stagnating for 40 years. Cost of living keeps going up. The purchasing power of our dollar keeps going down. These are all political decisions. This is not macroeconomic reality. This is politics. Now, who gains out of this? If the federal government deficit spends like crazy, spends on a federal job guarantee, everyone that wants a job gets a job, and it's a great job, it's a great paying job, it comes with benefits, everyone can be able to afford their lives out of their paychecks. No one need go to a bank to afford groceries, as more and more people are doing, to be able to pay their bills so that they don't get cold in the winter. This is what more and more people are using their bank loans and credit card loans for. It's not enough that we used to have to go to a bank to be able to afford a mortgage for a house and maybe a car and have low monthly payments and be able to pay that off, and we're done. But everything else, we could save for, we could spend, we can do things. No more. Those days are over for the vast majority of people in this country. And yet the economy keeps limping along. Why? Because they keep redefining what is employment. They keep redefining what is full employment. If you're a part-time worker, you're technically employed. You are not part of the unemployment. 4.1 unemployment that they say we have right now, fuck you, bullshit. I know that there are tens of millions of people who aren't even being counted because they've given up. I know that most of the people that have a job are underemployed. They're working 3 part-time jobs. They can still barely get by. But the banks make out like bandits because they get the interest. You get a new credit card. What do? You have to have an annual fee. If your checking account falls below a certain level, before a certain level, you have to pay a fee. They get fee after fee after fee after fee after fee after fee after fee. They are absolutely making billions of dollars a year off of our debt. If the federal government actually spent like they should, if they actually took care of the country like they should, these people would go back to the boring days of the 60s and 70s. They'd be clerks. Right now, they're fucking tycoons. The military-industrial complex has become the employer of last resort. They get so many recruits out of poverty. They get so many people to say, yes, I want to be able to go into the military. I want to be able to strap on a gun, and I want to be able to go off and, God, I hope I don't die. But they get a lot of people. They don't come from rich, affluent families the vast majority of the time. So if we had a federal job guarantee, everyone that wants a job gets a job. Great paying job. Military-industrial complex is going to be in trouble. Wall Street is going to be in trouble. They are going to lose quite a bit. And if we got single-payer health care, insurance companies will lose everything because we won't need them. Because we don't. Because for all these things, always remember, why do we have unemployment in the first place? Remember what I said in the beginning. They spend and then they tax. But who do they spend on? They need a lot of things. The federal government needs a lot of things. But it can't be fulfilled by 100% of the population, the things that the federal government needs. I need roads, so I'm going to hire contractors. I'm going to hire all manner of people and construction crews to be able to get that done. I need houses. I need this. I need that. I need a military. I need all manner of things. There's going to be a lot of people put to work, a lot of businesses that are already doing that sort of thing, but not everyone is going to be able to be a part of that. Those people have now become what? Unemployed. Those people are now unemployed. Whereas before they were just simply living, now you tell them they owe a tax obligation in a currency they don't have, they don't create, but they have to now chase and get. They are now unemployed. Government creates unemployment and then goes around and tells us that there's nothing they can do about unemployment, that it is natural, the natural rate of unemployment. Give me a fucking break. There's nothing natural about it. You created it, and then you tell us that there's nothing you can do about it, that it's up to the private sector to deal with all of that. But there's only so much the private sector will do. Not even can, will do, because the private sector exists for profit. That is the only reason they get into business in the first place, to make as much profit as they can. So they're not going to engage in businesses that won't make a decent return on their investments. So what do? We get a federal job guarantee. Government created the problem in the first place. Government is the only one that can fix it. 100% employment. Poverty comes to a screeching halt. Inequality can come to a screeching halt. We don't need to tax the rich before we do this. It is so important to understand this. It seems to me that people that want single-payer health care fall into two camps, by and large. Those that want to be able to tax the hell out of the rich so we can do it. And I feel bad for them because I used to be them. But we don't need to do it. And the other half think that it's never going to happen. And they don't fight for it. Not because they don't want it, not because they don't think we should do it, but because they think it's not going to happen. And why would I bother? And this brings me full circle to where I started. What do we do? The first thing everyone's got to do after they realize what they want, after they have found their hearts and realize that love is the springboard. It doesn't mean don't get angry. Do I look like someone who's not angry? I'm angry because I'm afraid. And I'm afraid because I think my children are going to die. I'm afraid because I think I'm going to die in a toilet at Walmart because I'm too old to be able to be a medical assistant. And the only one that will hire me is a cheap-ass place like Walmart. I'm afraid because I'm probably not even going to see that future because our environment is going to be so fucking toxic. I'm afraid because the water supply in so much of the country is toxic, that our food is poison. And I'm not going to sit in the middle of my living room and go, and hope that's going to fix it. I am going to sit in the middle of my living room and go, so that I can find the strength, the peace of mind to take that fear that has become anger and use it as righteousness to change it. So the first thing you've all got to do once you've figured out what you want to change is get up and do it. Stop talking yourself out of your own power. There is nothing more powerful in this country than 360 million people, or as many as possible, getting together and demanding change. There has never been any great upheaval in this country that was not demanded. Power will not relinquish itself willingly. It will have to be taken. That doesn't have to be violent. I abhor violence. If you espouse it, you are not my ally. I do what I do right now so that we don't get to the point of violence. Because I do see that in the future. And I don't want it. I don't want it for this country. I don't want it for this world. I don't want it for my children. I want to do what we can right now, while we can, while there's still time. While there's still time to teach and to educate and to get people around to the idea that you don't have to tax the rich before we get 100% green energy. We don't have to go after Wall Street before we get single-payer healthcare. None of that has to happen. We don't need their money. The federal government creates all it will ever need. It simply has to be populated by people that will choose to do it. And that's our job. We have to send people who will be willing to do it, who will be eager to do it, because they're going to be up against a wall of opposition. We absolutely positively do not have time. We can't go slowly. Incremental change may have been a wonderful idea in 1972. But in 2018, it is a death sentence. Look at my other streams. I'll tell you how many people die every year because of for-profit healthcare. Screw it, I'll tell you right now, 300,000 people, conservatively, will die every year because of for-profit healthcare. Look at my other streams to find out exactly why. You tell us that we have to go slowly and incrementally, and I will look you in the eye and say, you are sentencing people to death. Because you want to go slowly. Because you are choosing to go slowly, and we don't have time. You do it because you think you can't save everyone? I say, bullshit, we can. We absolutely can, and we have to. And to do anything less than that is reprehensible. If you're afraid, get over it. If you're worried it won't work, it's not going to work because you're not doing it. It's going to take everyone. I know what it's like to think that when you get up and you start talking, you're going to be the only one there. Get up. Do it anyway. I got your back. I love you. I need you. I need you motivated. I need you inspired. I need a fire in your belly. I need you to learn modern monetary theory, not because it's cool, but because it's the only way we're going to get the things that we need. Because to do it any other way is to go through an opposition that we could instead go around. I don't need to go through Wall Street. I don't need to go through the insurance companies. I need to simply say goodbye and go around them. This is what modern monetary theory gives us. It gives us the tools to be able to say, we know what we need. We know how to do it. We don't care how much it costs. We only care about inflation. And I tell you this, I will get a little bit of inflation and think it's a good deal if we save annually 300,000 people. You're telling me that 300,000 saved lives on top of everything else we could do, the eradication of poverty, the complete, absolute revitalization of our educational system. You're telling me that all that is not worth a little bit of inflation? Who the hell are you? We can do this. It is simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. You simply have to decide. Are you in or are you out? With or without you, I'm in. I hope you are too. I'll be back next week. Stay tuned for Savage Joy. I love you guys. Be good to each other. Bye-bye.